Welcome everybody to Kurimanzutto and the first talk in a series of conversations called Future Dialogues. We are very proud here at the gallery to be an artist-led gallery, and Future Dialogues is an artist-led conversation series. First, I would like to thank our incredible partners, Casa Dragones and INTERprotection, who are sponsoring this wonderful series. And I ask all of you, when the talk concludes, to stick around for a bit and enjoy a margarita or a tequila here. And now I'd like to pass this over to Humberto Moro, who will introduce the artists.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you, kurimanzutto. My name is Humberto Moro, and I'm Deputy Director at the Art Foundation. And it is my honor to introduce today two trailblazing artists who have questioned the logic of systems. They have pointed at the consequences of cultural, political, and economic extractivism in daily life, as well as they have insisted through their work in the importance of awareness, resistance, and aesthetic power. Minerva Cuevas, whose solo exhibition In Gods We Trust we're standing in today, was born in 1975 in Mexico City, where she currently lives and works. Her projects are developed as cultural and site-specific interventions, where she works with objects and images of daily consumption, and therefore, she creates a space for us to rethink the role which corporations have played in both the exploitation of natural resources and the conditions of social inequality worldwide. Through her work, Minerva explores our visual and familiar references, and at the same time, she questions our political imaginary to find channels of social communication. Minerva has exhibited extensively in solo and group exhibitions around the globe, and some of her international projects include exhibitions in museums like Museo Jumex, ICA San Diego, Museo Tamayo, Dallas Museum of Art, Banave Museum, Kunsthalle Basel, and Whitechapel Gallery, just to name a few. She has also been part of biennials like Prospect New Orleans, Liverpool, Berlin, Lyon, Mercosur, Sao Paulo, Sharjah, Sydney, and Istanbul, among others. Alfredo Jaar, our special guest today, will be in dialogue with Minerva. He's an artist, architect, and filmmaker. He was born in Santiago de Chile in 1956 and has been based in New York City since 1982. His work has been shown extensively around the world. Some of his most important exhibitions include the New Museum, the Whitechapel Gallery, MCA Chicago, the Museum Contemporary Art in Rome, Moderna Museet in Stockholm, amongst many, many others. He has participated in 4 editions of the Venice Biennale, 4 editions of the Sao Paulo Biennale, and 2 editions of Documenta. Alfredo has realized more than 75 public interventions around the world. Over 65 monographic publications have been published about his work. He became a Guggenheim Fellow in 1985 and a MacArthur Fellow in 2000. He received the Hiroshima Art Prize in 2018 and the Hasselblad Award in 2020. In Minerva's exhibition, we find a myriad of cultural, historical, and political references intertwined with a swirling juxtaposition of temporalities and imagery from distant but yet not unrelated eras. And today, it is a perfect environment for this dialogue to arise. I want to thank my dear friends Monica and Jose and all the kurimanzutto team for making this dialogue series possible, and encourage you to follow the future dialogues in subsequent iterations. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Minerva Cuevas and Alfredo Jaar.
So, welcome. Thank you for coming. We are honored by your presence. I want to thank Monica and Jose and their incredible team for organizing this. I think it's a brilliant idea and a much needed idea. Galleries in Chelsea have become very sophisticated and expensive vitrines that display very expensive goods. And all these goods, they only yell at us, buy me. And so it's very refreshing and poetic that a gallery wants to organize these conversations between artists. I think that we have to go back to the moment where we think that art tries to make sense of the world, of the context in which we live, and it's a starting point for conversation. And so I applaud this initiative from kurimanzutto. Finally, it's an honor to be invited by Minerva to share the stage with her. And so I thought that we would start inviting Minerva to tell us about the exhibition and in a few words so we can start talking about some of the works.
Thank you. It's an honor for me that you're here. Indeed, we have many coincidences, and I think even without talking about them, people that has been experiencing our projects will be able to sense all these connections. Thank you everyone for attending. I also would like to thank from far away all the team, the kurimanzutto team in Mexico City. All what you see here, it's not only my work, it's a team effort. And well, I would like to introduce the first artwork at the back. I thought about it very much as a nice way to connect to many things, not only a reference to New York because of the name of Diego Rivera, but also to introduce the big mural that you have in front of you and the element of sculpture. This introduction works for me also as connecting to the pre-Hispanic cultural life that Diego Rivera portrayed in his mural painted for the Mexican National Palace. You can see there in all its colors, but for this one, what I decided to do is to abstract the information, the shapes, the color into reliefs. You can see an area where people is weaving, producing textiles, also a first reference to Quetzalcoatl that is also represented here in the big mural, but also the practice of sculpting. Some of you might know that I also work with tar, and one of the first connections with using tar or oil as part of sculptures also connects to how many cultures, not only the Mayas, but Olmecs, used to use tar as a material symbolic when the element was important enough as part of a ritual. They would use also tar, and that's why the priest that is at the entrance sitting on top of these financial newspapers is partly covered with tar because he connects with the goddess that you have over here as well. She's also recognized in sculptures or even codexes when she's with a painted mouth, and the priest also has the arms painted with tar. So little by little, all these connections started to appear. I mean, I knew I wanted to produce a mural for this new space. It's an amazing space that probably anything you show here looks great. But I had produced a previous mural with a very general idea around economics. I used logos of German banks mainly, but also the MasterCard logo as a eclipse, part of the connections. That one is called the Enterprise. And for the works here, because I also, like Alfredo, respond to the context where I'm exhibiting, I thought that here my main research was going to be about the stock exchange. I spent some time going around Wall Street, and yeah, I thought that was the final decision. But then trying to connect also Diego Rivera as part of the mural, we remember Diego's mural at the Rockefeller Center was censored, so a way also to connect to the Mexican muralism history. For the first time, I reflected on his presence here and that situation with his mural that was destroyed because of references to communism. Little by little, it started making sense to concentrate on him, the Rockefeller Center, then also what made the family so rich, which was the oil that at the end became the trust in connection to the banking. So yeah, it was a little detour, but I think at the end it was a much more specific content. And to talk about each little element, you have also the brochure talking about all these, but sometimes I feel a bit witchy because I do something and then the news start to relate to the elements I've been using, and now we have all this banking situation, the collapse of some big banking institutions. But yeah, the initial thoughts were very much that, not to concentrate on the history of the banking in New York. What I usually like is that the works end up being so open that people approach me with their own associations or providing extra information about some of the banks. For example, someone told me from the installation team, someone told me that Chase Bank was originally a company dedicated to plan the infrastructure connected to water in the city of New York. That I didn't know. I usually don't need to intervene on the logos. It's basically, for me, an archaeology of the future, also going through historical elements, but also the gods that you see around. For example, here Chalchitlicue has to do with water, lakes, and in general is also a reference that connects dual personalities, no? And that's what I like about the references to Mesoamerican gods or nature, which at the end is also used by brands, no? Like you see here the eagle or the bird opposing each other a little bit. And the water is also a logo from one of the oil companies. So I guess it's some kind of visual alchemy, or how can we call it? Mm-hmm. But yeah, of course, our work also connects not only through all these social and political references, but even how images are not neutral and are not only linked to representation, but also very clear political statements. And well, that's a good example, no? The advertisement that we have here from different moments of the oil industry, no? The First World War, but then what I experienced going through many magazines is that it went from the war, very much fueling the war, to the car culture in the 50s, to references to natural resources and ecology. But you have also worked with Life magazine, and you know how it's not necessary sometimes to do anything to this material because the statement is there. No? Just bringing here one historical element gives a lot to think about.
Terrific. And do you have more of these, or this is the only set that you have?
I have a large collection. This is only a few of them. But yeah, every new one is a new shock in terms of content. The invitation poster is probably the most shocking I found. I even had to look for it because I didn't believe that it was a real advertisement. I thought someone had manipulated it. And then I remember part of the collection that is more dedicated to the war industry, and I thought, no, this is totally possible. No, they'll compare themselves to the most powerful thing on Earth, which is the natural phenomena and natural resources.
So, Minerva, can you tell us something about the title, which I think is absolutely brilliant?
Well, I was already in a very desperate moment because we were almost installing the show. I still didn't have a title. So I ended up going back to the initial idea of doing research on money and a more general concept of economy. And then I remember, okay, we have this slogan all the time present in the US currency, in God we trust, and then I started doing research on when that slogan appeared, and I found the news that not long ago, like 2019, there was already a state wanting to have the slogan as a sign in public schools, a mandatory thing, and then there were reactions, no? Because maybe there is people that doesn't believe in any God, but maybe there is other people that have different kind of faith. So it was controversial, and I thought maybe that's a good title. And then I reflected on the Mesoamerican gods. And there is a book called Queer Ancient Ways, which talks very much about how these multi-gods, that are not, how would you say that, like individuals. They can be multiple beings, and they can change from day to night in terms of how they are related to their connections to nature or powers. I thought, okay, it's not a god, it's gods, and that connects to the pre-Hispanic life, but also the currency. So that's how I decided about the title. But yeah, it also had to do with this, the news I found that it was compulsory to have it in some public schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the title. I thought it was quite impressive. Just the addition of one letter does a radical turn to the "in God we trust" to gods. And I actually thought maybe we should add another letter, which is another O, and go to "in goods we trust." But that's another story and another work of art. So, Minerva, I'm curious, what were you expecting from the New York audience? How do you think they were going to read this? How are they going to translate what they see? What did you think compared to the Mexico City audience?
I thought that maybe I was daring too much in presenting this kind of, especially the advertising I've been collecting, but whenever I have visitors in my studio in Mexico City and I show this to American visitors, they are surprised, and I thought, well, they should be familiar with this material, but no, I mean, it's of course historical. but somehow nowadays the visual input we have, either through internet or the speed of images, it's very different than when only existed the printed materials. So I wasn't sure about including these advertisements just as the single advertisement without any intervention, but then I realized this is enough, no? If a reminder or just bringing them into the public light is enough in my studio space, it might be enough in the gallery space. So apart from that, I didn't know because I'm not familiar with the gallery circuit in New York or in any city. I tend to isolate very much in my studio in Mexico City, and I'm much more connected to other cultural situations or social situations, and I get busy with that. So I didn't know what to expect, but that was one first hint, no? How to present the collection or not as it is.
Mm-hmm. When I saw the work, the advertisement, I immediately thought about the Ukraine war. And I thought about the so-called military, industrial military complex. And I thought about the words of Roosevelt, which was his farewell to politics. And I'm going to read just 5 lines from that farewell, where he introduces this concept of the industrial military complex, because it's quite hallucinating. So he says, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. So I immediately thought about this complex and the role it's playing in the war on Ukraine. Basically, it's defense industries that are winning this war, no one else. And it was telling to me that this complex was born right after the Second World War. The advertising, if I'm not mistaken, are from 1945. And so it's shocking how it started then. We had a warning from a former president about the power of that complex. And we are in a system where senators own stocks in the defense industries. And so when they approve 10 more billions to send to Ukraine, those billions come back and they buy arms from the defense industry, and the stock rises. And they also, more than 50 of them, they're in the pocket of the defense industry. Actually, they receive hundreds of thousands of dollars yearly. And so this is the same people that is voting for more money for Ukraine. Were you thinking about these things when you decide to bring this?
Well, there are constants in my work. Oil is one, and also one of the main industries, or the main industry getting profits from war is the fossil fuels, no, apart from the weapons industry. And that very much connects, of course, with ecology. We tend to forget that the military is the most polluting industry in the world. No? So in so many levels, it's wrong, no? These military interventions. And it's not about a nationalist agenda, it's a corporate agenda, as far as I've perceived, no? From working with oil. Yes, the references to the use in pre-Hispanic culture, but I mean, complete cities in Mexico are now dedicated to the oil industry after they were first dedicated to agriculture. No, nowadays they cannot sell anything that is connected to agriculture because of this industry is there, and it's not a national industry. No, it's already well, the international main actors that we are familiar with under different names and shapes and colors and logos.
I would love to hear something about those pieces along that wall, where you have these barrels with these logos and those figures.
Those are also part of my collecting problem, because when I first saw this kind of man cave souvenir, I thought they were perfect as an archaeological object. For me, the history of banking and logos and also their different brands are part of some kind of contemporary or even archaeology of the future. So that was also connected to how I've seen in public space these trash cans in playgrounds, and very often they have these animal heads, and children are meant to put trash through the animal mouth, and I just couldn't really connect how that was a positive thing. But anyway, for a previous show at the Museum Jumex, I started playing with also this, even paleontology, because I presented a huge mammoth, all created with newspapers, but also the ones connected to economics. So the people was able to touch and complete the artwork, this huge mammoth, because of a recent discovery in Mexico City. No, now it's Mammoth Central because of the new airport they wanted to build. So anyway, the whole thing connected to public space, playgrounds, and I am a big fan of going to the Anthropology Museum in Mexico and checking for the funny, interesting things, looking at the back of the pieces, and then these were taken from small ceramic sculptures, heads, and then I really like to connect to the humor of the pieces, but also the kind of representation and artisanal work of these pieces. But at the end, it's part also of an archaeology. In the case of the exhibition in Jumex, I decided to add a head that was connected to a Disney Pixar character, just to give it a push into the future and imagine how that would look from the future. You know, if someone finds this, like a Martian head, and yeah, it was just playful. But yeah, it comes also from the admiration of the pieces in the museum.
Mm-hmm. I understand you have been interested in oil for a long time, and you have worked in the area where in Mexico, besides the exploitation of oil, they also exploit cacao to make chocolate. And so what is this interest in oil? Where is it coming from, and what do you think about this?
Well, I first started to learn about oil because of the area in Yucatan, where this meteorite fell and left a mark, very much like a crater. And they discovered that not because of archaeological interest, but because they were trying to find a good place to dig and have an oil pipe, submarine pipe. So that took me to another area of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, and I was really trying to see the natural oil springs. No? My fantasy was going there and finding oil coming out of the earth, but couldn't see that. Everything is kind of controlled and blocked with concrete, but it was interesting anyway. The city, Ciudad del Carmen, only works for the oil industry nowadays. Before they were working for agriculture. It's a coincidence that the area for cacao, well, the origin is Mesoamerican, but it's also the area for oil. And people stopped cultivating cacao from the 70s when they ended up working for the oil industry. Ciudad del Carmen has this monument also, but it's the oil industry and the shrimp monument. There's nothing else in the city. So going to the market, I had access to photographs taken by the oil platform workers, because that was the only way you could see or experience a little bit of their life, you know? And that was part of an installation in 2007, also in Kurimanzutto in Mexico City, at their warehouse at the moment. That was an exhibition space. So I also started cooking tar and sacrificing objects, all kind of things, making references to marine exploration, classic references to environmentalism, but also the life of these workers and the situation at that moment when an oil platform stayed on fire for 2 months. So yeah, little by little, I think those kind of works, and even this exhibition works as a visual essay, no? And you can connect things. There's no central statement, I think. I like that the work stays open, but you can connect through your own filters, and I think that's very important, no? In the works. I mean, you have done also works that don't need any intervention, no? Just by going through the historical representations, you get the idea.
And by an incredible coincidence, this also connects us to what happened 20 years ago. We are commemorating the Iraq War, the start of the Iraq War, which was a disaster, and it was based on a lie about supposedly weapons of mass destruction, when in reality, Saddam Hussein had decided to start selling the oil in other currencies than the US dollar. And this country could not accept this. And then came the invasion, among other reasons. And so basically, oil is what explains also so many things that are happening now regarding, for example, the gas and oil that was sent from Russia to Ukraine, and then this country bombed the pipelines, and now Europeans are paying 4 times the price that they were paying for the oil and gas coming from Russia. And these are American companies that are making this kind of money right now. Now, please don't think I'm a Putin apologist. No, Putin is a criminal. I'm just trying to find some connections with the issues of oil. Now, Minerva, I'm sure they ask you this question all the time, which is the typical questions we get. This issue of art and politics. So when they ask you this question, but this is not art, this is politics, what do you tell them? What do you answer?
It gets worse than that. Because they don't say politics, they say activism. And then I'm like, oh no. And I've been trying to repeat that in every article or every interview, like this problematic. I mean, I'm very familiar with the terrain of social activism. I mean, coming from Mexico City, and also my background is being born to 2 primary school teachers, no? From the area of Oaxaca, which is the most socially intense area for this kind of struggle. So, of course, I'm very aware, and not only because of my work, but as a personal interest, I've been not only supporting but being part of projects that you can call social projects. So the main difference I find with activism is that you have a very specific objective and also a way to measure results. And what I enjoy and defend a lot being an artist is the freedom to do, and also the freedom to do not have to present a certain result or at the end something you cannot measure, but there are certain signs or situations when you can say, okay, these really had an influence on culture, therefore in a broader population and society, because I also think museums or even gallery spaces are very contained into themselves. But that reminds me of something I just told you about the rapper Residente using your work as part of his own lyrics. And well, he's followed by 6 million young people interested in rap. For me, that's the real political influence, no? And for me, that would be like a sign to prove how art or a social aesthetic practice at the end has this cultural influence, no? And it's impossible to predict, impossible to measure. So yeah, when I get that question is usually in relation to a more